Hi, marketers. This is Dots, and welcome to the Marketing Leadership Podcast. With me here is Cruz Sanders, founder and principal at Simple A, and we will discuss creating the solid content operations with content intelligence. Yes, it's still content in there. This episode is very interesting. So I want you to stop everything you're doing, strap in with your headphones or earphones or loudspeakers, and let's get it. Cruz, how are you doing?
Hey Dots, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to talk about content ops, one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible thing, and I'm ready to learn a lot more from what I've known before about this. So, but before we do that, do you want to please tell us a bit about yourself, your background, your role, and how you've come to build such a great leadership equity?
Sure, yeah. So I've been building websites and digital properties since very early in the internet, back in 1994, when the internet was really early, and it's evolved over time and worked in content management systems and doing integration work for a lot of the big CMSs. And eventually we found
Mm.
out that so many companies were just absolutely unable to get these things working well. Things would break, projects would break and go way over budget because they weren't focused on the content itself and how it's organized and structured and how that gets worked through a supply chain. And so I ended up just turning off my interactive agency and downscaling that business and starting a
Mhm.
business called Simple A, which is at simpleA.com. And Simple A is essentially all about the stuff that happens to content before it gets to the CMS and all the different ways it gets to do its work in all of the channels that we work with nowadays, where content's going out to so many different places.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, there's a lot of focus on traffic these days, whether it's community traffic or real website traffic. And there is so much less about what we're about to talk about today. The experience, and the operations behind the experience, and things like that. And I'm really glad to have you speak about this. But I guess in thinking about the whole subject from beginning to the end, I would like to get your thoughts on the recent tech trends when it comes to intelligent omnichannel experiences, and are there specific aspects of this kinds of technologies that customers should be excited about, especially when it comes to digital transformation?
Sure. Yeah. Well, of course, everybody's talking about AI,
Mhm.
and the role that generative AI, in particular, large language models, are playing in creating and even delivering content experiences out to customers. So this is an area that our clients have been very interested in. But there's also a lot of folks just working on the basic blocking and tackling of building a content operations infrastructure
Mhm.
because there's more channels to keep up with all of the time.
Yeah.
And if we're doing everything with copy and paste and by accident and last minute and trying to get it all accomplished across many teams, sometimes in businesses where lots of people deal with content, it gets to be a huge mess. And so as unsexy as it is, just really the operating uh, plan for content, sort of the game plan,
Mm.
is another thing we've been doing a lot of work with clients on. And
Interesting.
the other part, the last part I'll mention, is the connection between design and content. As we move to composable customer experiences, where there's pieces and parts from all the different from the design system and from a whole library of content, all of it's coming together into remixes, different ways that these things work together in different forms. That remixable environment is really needing a way to connect, especially designers and content people. And so
Mm.
we've been working in that area as well with Figma plugins that help to connect component content into design.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. And I'm sure there might be other aspects of that that you'll be happy to expand on as we get through the episode there, and I ask some of the questions um that might be related to that. Now to the topic at hand. It's a bit of yes, it's about content operations, but I'm really intrigued about the intelligent aspect of it. Uh, but first of all, I would like you to explain more about content operations in general, and the I guess the benefit throughout the omnichannel experience, and why marketers should care about that. I don't want to call it a concept, but caring about that, I guess, business role, if I will put it that way. Well, what's it all about?
Mm. Well, it's basically the business of day-to-day acquiring, managing, and leveraging or using content. So
Mm,
it's that management activity that monitors and evaluates and guides the content lifecycle
okay.
and the customer experience that is fed by that content lifecycle. And that ensures that the goals of the organization's content strategy are actually realized. So
Mm,
when when an organization sets out to use content as an asset, whether it's content marketing asset or whether it's for support, as part of a knowledge management function, or
yeah.
whether it's for basic thought leadership development. All of those forms of content are needing to work with content assets in a structured and logical way,
Mm,
especially when more people are touching those content assets. It's not just, usually it's very rare where you've got just content happening in a silo. There's a process for content. So content ops is really dealing with how the content gets done. It's the difference between managing a your own kitchen and building a single meal for like let's say four people versus running a kitchen, a commercial kitchen in a restaurant. In one of
mm,
them, you can do everything by improvisation and make it up as you go along. But in the
yeah,
other one,
that's
in the
the kitchen
restaurant,
in the
you need to
house.
make sure, yeah, you can serve everybody. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, I must say. And someone might be thinking, okay, what do we have here? But there you go. There is when it comes to marketing these days, number one, yes, it's not easy, but something else is there are implications as to the things that are done by marketers, and which is why having this is very important. Whether you're a small business or an enterprise, yes, most of what we'll be discussing is enterprise related, but a lot of walls are being broken right now, from B2B to B2C, now to H2H, and enterprise to small businesses to mid-sized businesses, that sort of variables. Anyway, I stopped my rants. Now, in terms of when I was researching this, I came across, okay, we do have content operations and we do have content marketing. And I'm just curious, are they even similar? Are there similarities? Are they different? Do they work together? You know, how should we place that in our heads as marketers?
Mm. Content marketing is an output of content operations, but
Mm,
also there's many other outputs. For example, let's say there's a chatbot on the website. Uh,
yeah.
that's that that is an output of some kind of content operation that had to happen in order to make that thing smart and
Mm,
say and do the right things to help those customers. So it's the same thing with any kind of customer support. That's an output of a content operation. So content
mm,
operations is it's the kitchen that's producing these customer experiences that are being sent into the restaurant.
mm. Interesting. Interesting. Um, Now, again, back to enterprises, and again, I don't think it's limited. If you're listening, you know what connects or relates with you. But something else I also learned along this process is the concept of the content service organization, and I know for enterprises, we don't have marketing teams anymore as such. We have huge commercial teams that comprise of marketing, sales, finance, service, and in some cases, IT transformation. So, how does content service organization, how does that concept work as a function? And do you have any example where that has been used? Like, an ideal scenario, if I would say.
Sure, yeah. So or simpleA.com, A has worked with some of the world's largest organizations building these things, these content services organizations.
Mm,
Um, we work with mid-market organizations and actually run some of the mid-market organizations CSOs or content services organizations. So we're very familiar with these. Basically, what in an environment like, for example, we work with one of the largest insurance companies in the world that
yeah.
provides health insurance,
Mhm.
and they have many, 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 many different customer experiences that they facilitate, and many of them use the same assets, the same content management
Yeah.
assets, but they don't always have the same system. So before we were working with them, they had separate teams producing the same content over and over and
Wow.
over in
Wow.
each channel. So each channel had its own team.
Yeah.
And so the problem with that is it creates a ton of extra millions of dollars in their case of extra spend
Yeah.
reproducing content and sometimes relicensing, by the way, the same like stock photography,
Mm, mm,
um, where they're paying for the same image multiple times because they don't have a clean organizational structure to help to find and discover existing content. So
yeah.
what we put in place at that organization is a centralized team, a content services organization that helps the in-place teams. It doesn't replace them. It doesn't try to centralize content. That's not what we're doing. With CSOs, you're not centralizing all content through this one company, through this one
Yeah.
central organization. You're creating a team with content operations, content strategy, content engineering, and basically producers that help to facilitate the content workflows against a content operating model. So basically, here's how we're going to do content. Here's how we work with agencies. When agencies deliver us content, here's how we make sure it conforms to some standards that we have about, for example, compliance. Here's how we do
Yeah.
translation. Here's how we apply metadata for search engine optimization. Here's how we tag that content, right? Here's how we get it into a digital asset management system. So they create the best practices for content in the enterprise, and then that team works with all of the product teams, all of the channel teams, and they basically help to serve them up. So what A does is what we've helped our clients to do is set that up, build their content operating model, recruit, train, and onboard the folks that run it, and then
Mm,
we get them kind of often into the races. And so we've worked with now many, many teams that are actually still running today inside of large fintech companies, large insurance companies, big healthcare providers, large technology firms. So they are these cross-functional content, you know, uh, superheroes that help
yeah.
content to work well.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. And the fact that, I mean, I think this role that you've explained before is just managed by almost everybody. Yeah, in some cases, the products manager might be handling something like that. I mean, product marketing manager. Some people do call them brand managers. But what you're doing is having this system of, I guess, a mixture of personnel and tools and so on and processes that have this consolidated effort to manage these different teams. And so instead of having, duplication, you actually you now have more resources to create what
Mhm.
I call an in-moment experience with content,
Mm. Mhm.
which is awesome. The next one here is, and I've spoken to a couple of well-known SEO experts around cluster content. But what we have in our case here is content mapping, and it's the intelligent, kind. And so, yes, I know that, great content mapping helps to elevate online presence, but I know there are
Mm.
many other benefits to that. And I would like to get your opinions or your perspective as to some of the other ways where, intelligent content mapping works well and the benefit of that for any marketer listening.
Oh gosh. Okay, this is one of my favorite things to talk about is how content becomes intelligent, and exactly mapping is map mapping content to terminology to create semantic clusters or clusters of words that all relate to each other across, for example, a set of web pages or
Mm,
multiple digital properties. You're creating relevance and smoothing customer experiences so that they are all kind of following the same scent, the same sort of through line through a pipeline or a funnel
yeah.
that helps them get to an end outcome. All of that requires tagging systems. So in order
Mm,
to connect content, to map it together, to make it semantically relevant, we need to create something. It's kind of a fancy word, but it's called a semantic model. And so
mm,
what a semantic model is it's just a set of taxonomies or
okay.
tag set. So
Yeah.
if we know what we're going to tag our content, just like Instagram has tags, right? So
Mm,
it's like telling all the teams, okay, here's the set of tags we're going to use in Instagram so people can find our stuff,
mm,
right?
mm,
So if each team is doing their own thing, then customers might not be able to find the same related content. But if each team has a set of like tags to use and their AI knows to use those to help suggest those tags on their content, right? Then we can do auto tagging, or we can do AI assisted tagging on top of content development. So while people type in stuff, or they ask their AI, the LLM, to create
mm,
content for them, they can incorporate these words or add these tags that are going to help that content be connected and discovered. And so that's another thing we do with our clients is help people to build these taxonomies of tags and then
yeah.
connect them into a system and then get that into the content services organization so that the CSO can help other teams to use it. That starts to get all the stories connected. So when different product teams are talking about the same, customer benefit, for example, that all
Mm,
of those things can be discovered on the website easily, suggested by the chatbot, or delivered in the mobile app in a way that's connected and intelligent, right? So it feels smart to the customer, so their time is respected because they're getting the
yeah.
best content right at those, like you're talking about, those moments that matter.
Yeah, it's kind of like I did speak to a very popular podcast producer out there in the UK who has a similar system for converting podcasts into books. Never heard it before, and I thought that was fascinating. And in your case, being able to do things like this at scale for like a Forbes.com, for example, with
Mhm.
millions of articles at this point, is
Mhm.
it's very, very, beneficial, really, if I'll put it that way. And I like the fact that you've mentioned some aspect of technology here. So you've spoken about, how AI had, or I guess, suggestive mechanisms and things like that can advise on content suggestions with the correct mapping. But I would like you to explore some of the other technological, I guess, advances that come into play when it comes to, not just content intelligence, but the content operation itself. If you want to talk about ChatGPT, sure, I'm just going to be another podcast talking about ChatGPT at this point. But what are some of the other things that people are not looking at that they should be looking at when it comes to, I guess, content delivery innovation? Whether it's
Ah,
at the back end or based on what the customer says?
Yeah, there's an architectural approach to content systems that is called um, mock, which is essentially talks about moving everything to a decoupled approach where the parts work together in a supply chain so that each part is able to be recomposed for different uses. So they call it composable systems.
Mm,
Mock is about microservices and using essentially APIs, content APIs, to
yeah.
create um, these composable systems, outcomes within headless content management systems. And a headless system is basically just a way to put content out into multiple channels in these recompositable ways, where the content is coming via an API and different teams are reassembling that content into new experiences. And then, what we've built is a way to get content out of headless systems into design systems, into Figma, so that designers can use structured content as they're prototyping
Yeah.
customer experiences. So, for
Yeah.
example, you're building a new campaign, instead of starting with the blank screen, you start with your design system and say, okay, I want my standard masthead. I want my
Yeah.
promo box. I want
Yeah.
I want the sort of standard um, offer. And so all of those are standard design components. Our goal is to combine that with standard content components. So things that can be reused from within the headless system, so that we're
Mm,
designing new customer experiences using ingredients, and then it happens like 20 times or 30 times faster than you can normally build a campaign, because the ingredients are all there. It'd be like going into
yeah.
the kitchen at, like, I don't know if you've ever been to a PF Chang's, you know, like,
No, I can't.
or like a, I guess another one would be like a Denny's or something like that, where
Dennis,
there's,
yes.
yeah, there's like many, many, many different locations, and they have the same menu, and they're able to put different um, different things together using a similar set of ingredients. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're at least with PF Chang's and other the higher end fast casual restaurants, they the local chef has the ability to create menu changes. And so they
Mm,
kind of,
mm,
but they all use the same supply chain, they use the same set of content, they use the same sort of design standards for the experience, but they're able to do it faster and less expensive with a better consistent experience, um, even with the ability for chefs to be creative by standardizing the ingredients and standardizing the supply chains and the infrastructure. So it's the same thing with content at scale. You need a way to help to standardize some of it and let people be as creative as possible within their product teams or their in-country teams
yeah.
or their campaign teams.
When it comes to global strategies, yeah. And another benefit is cost savings. Earlier you mentioned that you helped some companies save millions on just creating efficiency at scale with content delivery. Do you want to elaborate on how this method or this solution helps with cost savings?
Yes, yeah, because it does do both. It expands revenue opportunities, but also massive amounts of cost savings. So on the cost saving side, uh, it eliminating duplication, waste, and friction
Yeah.
is the job of content operations. And the bigger the organization, the more of that stuff is running around. And so we're able to pay for these programs, the CSO programs. We're able to pay for them, usually out of first year savings. So the
Mm,
ROI is very fast on if you're able to speed up production of a campaign by 5 times by reducing the amount of manual hours out of it,
mm,
sometimes in the dozens, sometimes in the hundreds of hours per campaign, then all of that, let's say you take the average enterprise employee cost, times
mm,
that amount of hours, you've now re you've now reduced that, and then you just multiply it by the number of campaigns you're running per year,
yeah,
and it's and you get an ROI very quickly, in the millions of dollars. And so we're able to pay for spinning up new CSOs out of the savings very often, within the first year.
mm. That is interesting. A lot of times you've mentioned the content supply chain. Um, you know, some may call that a workflow, uh, but I really like that model. In the past, I've had a lot of interviews with people outside marketing in terms of like stakeholder engagement and things like that. And I actually had someone speak about marketing from a context of procurement,
Hmm.
campaign management from a context of procurement. So what you're saying now is just like nostalgic, well, not very nostalgic, just quite a while, just not long ago. It reminded me of what was said then. But what we forgot to do then, which will help us do now, is to break down the process.
Mhm.
So, walking us through step by step at a high level, Cruise, through the supply chain process and how
Mhm.
you get to from the beginning to the end in terms of, I mean, the end being the outcome. What does that look like? And our listeners are with their pens now. They're ready to take notes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it starts with just tracking what happens to content, and so there's a
Okay.
life cycle. So each content each content item, output item, like for example, let's say a landing page for a campaign.
Yeah.
That landing page is going to go through a life cycle. There's stages that it goes through. And in some organizations, that has to go through regulatory approval. Like, for example, in
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals, everything goes through
Yeah.
medical and legal review.
Yeah.
Um, and what are the steps, and who and what amount of time is it taking each one? So what we like to do, if we're doing a true supply chain optimization initiative, is benchmark the current content life cycles and understand all the actors, who's involved, all the objects, what's involved, all the systems, right, that
Mm,
work with
mm,
content,
mm.
and then all the amount of time, like the time factor for each thing. And we put that all together into a content lifecycle analysis per major life cycle. So it's worth doing for anything that has happens a lot, right? If it's like like you were talking about, some enterprises, they'll publish, you know, tens of thousands of X a year, whether it's offers or promotions, or whether it's uh it might be podcasts or whatever. It's like, what does
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
take to produce that? Once we have that life cycle analysis and we have the benchmarks, then we know what we're racing to beat. And it works just exactly like if we were optimizing a production line, for example, a Tesla car, right?
Mm,
And so some things you can put a robot in. Some things, if you put a robot in, it's
yeah.
gonna mess it up. Like, you need you need humans. And so where can you add automation? Where can you add technology? Where can you streamline? Where can we make more efficient? Where can specialist teams, like from content services organization, come in and make it work better? Sometimes, like, we found in one organization, changing the way that translation hands off worked, um,
Yeah.
just making that modular, and they were able to save so much money from just not retranslating um, the same content over and over. They were starting to translate just the pieces that changed, not just the whole asset every time there was a change. And so there's all kinds of cost savings that we uncover when we do a life cycle analysis, because it's like the first time for many organizations they're thinking about how we spend money on content, you
Mm.
know? So,
Interesting. Interesting. Again, very underserved. If you speak to any, I've had a chance to interview Danati Datimaso folks like Julian Gilliman of Measure School, and just even just the pure marketing intelligence house cleaning, as I would call it. Many often ignore that, and I like the fact that you make that, I guess, the leading source of of the operations going forward. I like what you said, of course, about the what goes into improving content over time, and why there is an efficiency behind that, driven by people, process, and technology. So that's really, really great. I would like to get your thoughts on. You mentioned something about the data bit there, so I'd like to get your thoughts on performance indicators. I have some experience with marketing intelligence, and I know that when it comes to BI or MI, two major things are evaluated. The first bit is the customer, I guess, customer engagement metrics or dimensions. But the second thing is the process performance metrics. And in this case, they're talking about the process. I would like to get your thoughts on um, first, not just the analytical capabilities of what is required, but also examples of KPIs or performance indicators that shows that our content operation is oiled, is optimal, is where it needs to be. We shouldn't panic. What's
Mm.
your thoughts on that from experience?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's really right on. There's the performance metric for the content itself, and then there's the how the content gets done. So there's the metrics for the process,
Mm,
and in some ways these are pretty interrelated because
okay.
a good process will equal a good product and more effective outcomes. So
Mm,
sometimes, even though we're trying to save money and optimize and make things more efficient, uh, you know, really what we're doing is we're increasing the capability of an organization to talk and listen to customers.
yeah.
And that is exciting because content is the way we connect with customers in all of our channels.
Mhm.
And the data of their performance, like how they interact with the content, their engagement, that's the way we listen. And in true intelligence is about connecting how we talk and how we listen to content assets. And really that is the nature of content intelligence, is that creating a natural, effective, living, and ultimately rewarding conversation uh,
Yeah.
for customers. The metrics on the production side tend to be things like velocity.
Okay.
So how quickly does it take to get from this part to this part in our content lifecycle, or in order to complete a full thing, right? In some organizations, we go in and it's taking them. We had one organization that was telling us it takes 8 months to produce a new like web page significant article for a product because of how many steps they have to go through with manual
Okay.
process. It seemed like it, like crazy to everybody, universally understood as a problem, but they
Mhm.
didn't really understand, you know, like how to do it better. And so we're able to work with them and sort out that the problem was in the medical and legal review cycle and in the translation life cycles, and
Mm,
that they didn't have anybody facilitating those connections, and they were completely manual. There's manual transformations happening. So we automate the transformations and then put a services organization in place to help to facilitate the handoffs, and just that alone cut cut that down to where they're able to get things out within a month. And so it's when you're able to do things 8 times faster, your entire business transforms, because all of a sudden,
absolutely.
instead of, quarter by quarter results where you have to plan out a year out ahead, you're able to see changes and revenue impacted within a quarter. So it's a huge strategic value, and that's coming from a velocity metric. So, it's there's some really basic things like that that make a huge difference. Quality is another one.
Okay.
Getting quality measures benchmarked and understanding what makes quality content uh, is an overlooked one. Cost, of course, how much does it cost to produce any given output? Sometimes it's things like uh, how easy is it for my managers to get their business outcomes accomplished? So it's like an internal satisfaction metric. There's
Mm.
customer satisfaction. We're often like talking to customers in terms of net promoter score or time to resolution or how many new
Yeah,
inbounds
that's
we're
true.
getting. But what about
Yeah.
the internal customers, right? Like
Yeah.
how happy are your product managers about working with your content team? So, some of those internal metrics about satisfaction are key too. So those are a few.
Yeah. 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 Makes sense. Thank you for sharing so much around that. We've discussed very good things about content operations and how that can be done intelligently. But what happens when things go wrong? And I would like, based on your experience, give us, I guess, various scenarios or indicators where it's obvious that there is going to be trouble or there will be trouble.
Mm.
Mistakes that marketers make that they need to stop making to cause, a marketing or a content campaign crisis when it comes to the content ops ecosystem, as we will put it. Every ecosystem has its own problems, and I would like you to tell us what happens with content operations. What are the things that go wrong? Why do they go wrong? And I guess if our listeners put those two things together, they will know what not to do going forward.
Yeah, yeah. There's a there's a really interesting. We did a talk on the 7 ways to avoid the biggest failures in content operations, and it really kind of goes into um, uh, kind of this whole topic of failure points, because it's a
Mhm.
really good question because there's so many ways that things can fall apart, and unfortunately most organizations aren't even conscious that these things are happening, so they don't know they need to fix them because they just see you know things are taking a long time and people are unhappy and people are working crazy hours to get simple things done, and it just feels like sluggish. And so there's a lot of stuff like that, but they don't recognize these kind of danger points. And so on simplea.com, we have it's all for free. We've got a ton of that kind of content that goes in depth on it. But I will say that some of the biggest failure points are all things that are when you look back on them, like
Mhm.
pretty simple, but that are taken for granted. So one of the biggest ones is handoffs. How does something go from the subject matter expert to, for example, the editor that is working with the article? And then how does it go from the editor to the person that needs to put it up on the website? And then how does it get onto the website? So
Yeah.
those little handoffs, and then if you add translation in there, there's another one. But, those little handoff points, sometimes they are, uh, they're tracked they're either tracked manually, like people are telling each other, "Okay, it's ready. Here's an email," and they've got to go get the email and then remember to do something with it and take it to the next step. Or it's in a system like Jira, so it's a ticket
Yeah.
management system, and
Yeah.
and they've got some way to flag down a Kanban to say, "Hey, next person in sequence, the time is right for you." Those breakdowns between those points and the way that those move, that's the lowest hanging fruit. And if you do nothing else other than just know what your handoffs are and improve them, you can increase massive amounts of velocity and improve everybody's experience by just looking at handoffs. So I'll give you that as the as one place, and then some of the other major ones, and check out the website for more because it would take us a long time to go through them.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Um, man, Cruz, I I came in here with the intention that you're going to really help us break this down from a very simple, succinct, and valuable perspective. And you've not just done that; you've gone way above and beyond in breaking down this process for us, and including myself. I hope our listeners have learned so much overall when with regards to content operations and why that is important in my opinion, even for smaller businesses. Because at the end of the day, if your averages aren't right at the smaller stage, they won't be right when they are big. So, with that said, again, thanks for sharing your premium wisdom with marketing. But where can our business leaders learn more about you? Where can our marketers learn more about you? And feel free to mention that resource again that you just said.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So check us out on simpleA.com. And simpleA.com, if you do a search for content operations, we've got a ton of stuff on there. We have a YouTube channel called The Invisible World of Content, and that talks about all this stuff, content engineering operations,
Hmm.
content services organizations, all of that. And we've got little videos that go through all of it. So that's a good one. And then there's a podcast that I run uh, for content oriented business leaders, and that's called Towards a Smarter World. So any of those places are great, and feel free to look me up on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. That's all for today, guys. Please see more episodes at dotslovesmarketing.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the Marketing Leadership Podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Till next episode, connect the dots.
Thank you for listening to the Marketing Leadership Podcast, brought to you by Listen Network. There will be links to resources mentioned in today's show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.